there is no climate emergency. And that, I think that is a powerful message.
My guest today is Marcel Crok.
I'm from the Netherlands, as you can probably hear from my accent. Some people can hear it clearly. I studied chemistry. Physical chemistry was my major at University of Leiden. And then I decided to become, by coincidence, more or less, I decided to become a science writer, science journalist. And I have done science writing since then, actually, so for the last 25 years. And then around 2004, 2005, my editor-in-chief told me to write about a so-called hockey stick graph. And I decided to have a look at that. And 2 months later, I had a huge article about the work of McIntyre and McKittrick. And the rest is history, you could say, because since then I was so intrigued by the climate debate that I decided to work full-time on climate. I gave up my job and I worked on a book for 2.5 years, unfortunately only available in Dutch. The State of the Climate, it's called. And since then I have been, I've specialized myself in the climate debate, you could say.
So you've been heavily involved now for close to 20 years. I'm impressed by that.
Yes. I'm also impressed by that. I can hardly believe it. Maybe it's interesting to go a little bit back because this really, I often, when I give talks to a general public, I often say, without this first article about the hockey stick, I really wouldn't be here on stage, because that was such an intriguing period. And you probably know that the hockey stick affair was central in the ClimateGate controversy and McIntyre, McKittrick. So I spent hundreds of emails and phone calls with them. There is some other sound. I'm clicking away some other accounts. That was really a deciding episode, you could say, because without that experience, I wrote about all kinds of scientific topics, and I was not specialized in climate or environment. But since then, I was so intrigued by how the IPCC and in Holland, how KNMI, our institute KNMI, how they reacted on my on their criticism about the hockey stick. The response was zero, you could say. They didn't really respond to the criticism, and that was really a wake-up call for me.
Yeah, so you wrote that the lack of self-criticism in the IPCC community intrigued you, right? As you started to dig into the hockey stick, what specifically did you find that really raised your eyebrows?
Yeah, so my editor-in-chief said, "Oh, there is something going on with the hockey stick. Can you look into it?" And I never wrote about climate, so I really hadn't heard about the hockey stick. And I started doing my general research, like you do as a journalist. You start looking in the newspapers, in the archives, in Scientific American or New Scientist. And then I quickly found out that there were 2 Canadians, McIntyre and McKittrick, who had criticized the hockey stick, but the problem was that their paper was rejected by Nature. And of course, as a journalist, you are depending a little bit about peer-reviewed publications, because otherwise you have no guarantee that it's correct, or that it's, with peer review, you also have no guarantee that it is correct. We nowadays know. But at the time, it was really important. And it was very funny. There was a German scientist, Hans von Storff, and he also had criticized the hockey stick in Science. And so after a few weeks, I did my research in Holland, and I said to my editor-in-chief, there is this interesting story by 2 Canadians, but their paper is rejected. But I can go to Germany and talk to a German professor, and maybe he knows more. And Hans von Storck said to me, "I think the Nature paper by McIntyre and McKittrick should have been published." And when he said that, because in Holland, all the experts said to me, "Well, don't take them serious. They are no climate scientists, etc., etc." The usual ad hominems, you could say. And so I went to Germany, and after von Storck had said that, I decided to contact McIntyre McKittrick. And then I had a phone call with McIntyre, who was in Toronto. I was in Amsterdam. And we talked for 3 hours. And he had spent 2 years working on the hockey stick between 2003 and 2005. And so then the next day I said to my editor-in-chief, whoa, I think we have a story, but the only problem is they still haven't a peer-reviewed publication. And then we more or less worked more, we joined forces, you could say, and they gave me the scope of their work. And ultimately, when my article was published at the same day, their geophysical research letters paper was also published. So I had the scoop of their work with my first article on climate ever. The article was published in Dutch. It was published also in the Canadian Financial Post, thanks to McKittrick. He arranged that. It was a very long article. It was 5,000, 6,000 words. I sent it to you, a PDF. It's still on my website. We can make it available for your listeners. And then for the next 2 years, I was really like, no, I won a prize. I won an award with the article. I was really surprised because even at the time, it was politically incorrect what we had written. We criticized a very important IPCC graph, but I won an award in the Netherlands with that article. But also people at KNMI and also my colleagues in Holland, they started claiming, they started saying, oh, Marcel Crok has become a climate skeptic. And I was really like, okay, what's going on? I worked for 2 months on the full time. I worked for 2 months on that article. I knew I had the facts right. And McIntyre McKittrick had done an excellent job. And people started calling me names, and that response from society, you could say, and also from science, that really intrigued me. And that was the main reason that I decided to focus on climate full time.
Were you the first person in the mainstream media to write about the hockey stick?
I would say not really the first person. There had been some articles. As you maybe remember, they had an earlier article in Energy and Environment in 2003. McIntyre McKittrick. And so at the time, there were also some articles, even in the Dutch newspapers. But at the time, McIntyre McKittrick didn't really have all the details fixed. So, and after that article in 2003, a man released new data, and that new data that ultimately led to the solution.
You said you spent many hours working with McIntyre and McKittrick, digging into the details of this stuff, right?
Yeah, because it was very, as you maybe remember, it was very technical. It was about the R2 verification statistics, etc. And it was about principal component analysis. It was about flawed data, but also about flawed statistics. And ultimately, I did a lot of effort to find independent experts. So I was looking for an expert in principal component analysis in the Netherlands. I ultimately didn't find anyone. I found a professor in Leuven in Belgium, and she was an expert in principal component analysis and in robust statistics. And I asked her to read the original 1998 Michael Mann hockey stick paper, and also the new paper that was then under review. And she did that for us. And she also confirmed that the criticism of McIntyre McKittrick about the principal component analysis, Mann had made a mistake in his principal component analysis. And the result of that mistake was that whatever you throw in with regard to the data, you always get a hockey stick out. So McIntyre McKittrick showed that if you used red noise, so that is noise with some trends, some long-term trends, that because of the error in the statistics, the program will select those time series that have a hockey stick in the 20th century, and will highlight those time series. And as you maybe remember, there was one time series in man that was the Bristlecone Pine time series from California, and that dominated his whole hockey stick actually. So one tree, very specific tree in California, dominated the whole northern hemisphere temperature in the original hockey stick. That was amazing. It was the Bristlecone pine. It's a very specific tree in a mountain area in California, and of course, you don't use one single tree for a tree ring series. So, but this was the species that was used, and it showed a huge hockey stick in the 20th century. But in the literature, it was shown that this huge increase in the tree ring width from that specific tree was due to CO2 fertilization. So it wasn't even a temperature signal, but it dominated the whole temperature reconstruction for the whole northern hemisphere.
So this one thing completely killed off the hockey stick in my mind back in maybe 2005 or so. But man is still standing by it to this day, isn't he?
Yes, they are still, and they now say there are new hockey stick reconstructions who confirm the old one, and McIntyre has gone on. I mean, he worked on his blog Climate Audit for so many years, and I think after ClimateGate he lost interest, because then he saw how they talked about him, in what kind of denigrating language, and it was really unprofessional to see this behavior. And then he did it for so long, so I understand that he now more or less quit this debate. Sometimes he posts about it, but much less than in the past.
So do you think you yourself were able to find more problems with the hockey stick after you read the ClimateGate emails, or did you know about all this stuff already before those emails came out?
Well, we knew a lot, but I mean, McIntyre is really the expert here. He went through all these databases. He knows all the individual time series. He knows so many problems in detail. I mean, I remain more a journalist, So later on, I teamed up with Nick Lewis, and we wrote a report about climate sensitivity. So I cannot go in such a detail as people like Nick Lewis can do with climate sensitivity, or McIntyre can do with the hockey stick.
All right, I just wanted to quote you about Nick Lewis here. You said it was great to work with Nick. He is one of the best and smartest scientists I have ever met. So yes. High praise from you for him. Yeah, I need to get him on this podcast. I'd love to.
Yeah, I hope he will do it. Yeah, that would be excellent. Yeah, Nick is amazing. I mean, he used to work in a different field, and then at 50 he decided, okay, now I have time for myself. What can I do? Okay, I become a climate scientist, and I'm fully independent, because he was financially independent. And then he freshed up his math skills, and then he decided, okay, let's focus on climate sensitivity, because McIntyre is already doing the hockey stick, so nothing to do there. So let's do climate sensitivity. And then he started blogging at Judith Curry's blog, and he started writing and publishing peer-reviewed papers. And it's amazing. At the moment, if I really need to know something about the literature, I always ask Nick, what's your opinion about this paper or that paper? And he knows so many papers, the most important papers of the last 10 years. He has read them all, and he has a very good view on that.
So do you have a personal opinion on climate sensitivity at the high level? What do you think is the climate sensitivity for doubled CO2 at this point from here?
Yeah, that's the $60 million question, of course. I don't really have an opinion about that. I know that, people like Nick Lewis, they go very far accepting the theory of IPCC. So he accepts that most of the warming since 1850 is due to greenhouse gases. But then he focuses on using observations for estimating climate sensitivity. And if he is doing that, he did that with me in the report we published in 2014. The report is called A Sensitive Matter. It was published by the Global Warming Policy Foundation. And later on, he published 2 papers with Judith Curry about it. And in their latest paper in 2018, they show that if you use the observations and then estimate climate sensitivity, accepting all the assumptions by the IPCC, so you accept that all the warming since 1850 is due to greenhouse gases, then they still end up with a climate sensitivity of about 1.5 or between 1.5 and 2. Of course, other people like Richard Lindzen or Will Hepper, they will say it is even lower because there is also natural climate change since 1850. And I disagree that all the warming since 1850 is due to greenhouse gases. Willie Soon will say the same. Ronan Connolly will say the same. There is also a solar component. And Nick Lewis, of course, agrees. If the solar forcing was higher than IPCC now claims, then climate sensitivity will become even lower, but this is really hard to find out. So it is interesting what Nick Lewis is doing, because it gives you almost, like you could say, it gives you almost an upper bound to climate sensitivity based on observations.
So Nick is accepting the assumption that all the warming since 1850 was caused by CO2, just kind of to be charitable to the IPCC. It's not that he's looked at all the data himself and determined that natural variability didn't cause any of the warming?
No, he looked at the data, but he thinks it is a reasonable assumption, and you should discuss that with him. You probably doesn't agree with him on all aspects. Like you had a nice conversation with Roger Buelke, and it's interesting if you disagree with somebody and have a respectful conversation about it. So you should really discuss that with him.
Okay, that sounds good. I wanted to get back to the hockey stick and the whole hide the decline issue. Is that something that you found right away that they had spliced in the data there, and because trees are not thermometers after 1960, that type of thing?
Yeah, well, that was an amazing, amazing part of the climate gate. In my opinion, it was the most, what's the right word? I mean, it was terrible, of course, to read that in the climate gate emails, that they really tried to hide the decline. But McIntyre had already shown this actually on his blog, Climate Audit, but now it was on the record, And for me personally, there was even an anecdote, because when ClimateGate happened, I also looked for my own article about the hockey stick, my 2005 article, and there is a ClimateGate email about my article. It's called Man and Jones are talking about that Dutch magazine. So that is my article. And it was really intriguing, because what happened was that when my article came out, KNMI, that's our official climate institute, like NOAA, KNMI started accusing me of misquoting them. And their quote was very neutral. It was quite nothing, you could say. They said in the quote something like, "This is a serious issue, and we will discuss it in Beijing in the next IPCC meeting." And then my article came out, and they attacked me for misquoting them. And I didn't understand it. I mean, the quote was so meaningless, in my opinion, that why accuse me? And I heard they, even at the ministries in Holland, that KNMI had spoken badly about me. He's a bad journalist. He has misquoted us. And then came ClimateGate. And what are Mann and Jones saying in the email? They are saying, IPCC is not going to discuss this in Beijing. So Mann and Jones were not amused that the KNMI guy had said, we are going to discuss it in Beijing. And so the KNMI person, he was in trouble. He had the feeling, I'm in trouble, because Mann and Jones, who were much more influential in IPCC circles, and this KNMI person was also involved in IPCC. So he thought, he had the feeling he was in trouble, and he decided to attack me and to claim that I misquoted him.
I think it's amazing to me that it was a different time back then that you could actually win an award for doing what you did around 2005 or so. Because you would never win an award nowadays, would you, for doing anything skeptical in climate?
Maybe, but Holland is, yeah, Holland, I would say Holland is a peculiar country. Yeah, we have this, what we call the Boulder model. And the Boulder model means that we always talk with all the different parties, etc. It's totally different from the binary system that you have in the US between the Democrats and the Republicans. We have a many-party system, and in general, there is some openness in the media, although nowadays there is also a cancel culture. So at the moment, I'm more canceled than I was back in 2005 or in 2010. When my book came out, even the left-wing, the progressive newspapers, they paid attention to my book. I had a big interview in like our New York Times, so it is different. It's less polarized than in the US. And I think the award that I won, that was the first year that they had this award, and it was for science journalism. And I think the research that I had done, well, it was so much more research than any other article that was sent for this award. So that the jury decided, yeah, this is by far the most interesting work that we received this year.
So which countries in Europe do you think are most open to alternate viewpoints? Like, I don't think in the U.S. the media is not open, but how about in Europe?
It's hard to say, but I would say that in the bigger countries like Germany, France, England, it's very closed. So it's very, very, very alarmist, the mainstream media. You have to go to Eastern Europe. They are much more on our side. So the former communist countries, and they know what propaganda is, by the way. So and this really plays a role. And at the moment, you see some countries like Italy and Sweden, they now have more right-wing governments. In Sweden, for example, there are plans for 10 new nuclear power stations. And in Italy, with Meloni, there is also a more conservative government. But in general, I would say that all Western European countries it's very hard to have a opposing view about climate in the news, to get it in the newspapers.
So from where you're sitting, do you have any opinion on what's going on in the media in like New Zealand or Australia? Politically or in the media, what's happening?
No, you should talk there. Actually, recently, Joanne Nova, she joined more or less Clintel, so our editorial team. So she is also going to write for Clintel. Yeah, we didn't discuss actually that I'm from Clintel Foundation. So I founded Clintel Foundation in 2019 with Guus Berghout. He's a professor of geophysics. And what I nowadays do is I run the foundation, and from the foundation, we try to publish books and reports and articles, and we do court cases when necessary, etc. And Joanne Nova, I'm very excited that she's willing to join our team. So she or Jennifer Marohesi, they are much better to have an opinion about that, I would say.
Okay, yeah, I'm looking at your website there. It's clintel.org, and that stands for Climate Intelligence, right? Clintel.
Yeah.
It's been up there for 4 years. It's got a ton of great information. Lots of interviews are out there, written interviews. And then you have your World Climate Declaration, right? Which has been getting some publicity. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So Guus started, Guus, my co-founder, Guus Berghout, he started with drafting the World Climate Declaration in the year that we started in 2019. And it's, in the beginning, I was a bit skeptic about it because there are so many, we have the Oregon petition and we have other declarations, etc. And I'm not a big fan of those, but Guus persisted. And I think the strength of this World Climate Declaration is that it is very short. It's only one page. And the central message is there is no climate emergency. And this holds true, in my opinion, for a lot of different people, So you can sign our declaration. If you feel I have something valid to say about this, you can go to our website and you can fill in the form and you can sign our declaration. And it is signed by a lot of scientists, but also engineers and other experts, like experts in economy or law. And so it's a very broad group of experts. And so, I mean, Nick Lewis he didn't sign, but Nick Lewis could agree with the conclusion, there is no climate emergency, even when he accepts that most of the warming since 1850 is due to greenhouse gases, in his opinion, But there are other people like Willie Soon, he also signed the declaration. He, of course, thinks that large part of the warming is maybe due to solar, urban heat island effect, etc. So it is, I sometimes say it's 50 shades of gray. It's not that we have now 1,800 signatories of the declaration. And so it is not that there is consensus in this group, but they do agree about the central message that there is no climate emergency. And that, I think that is a powerful message. It has been a powerful message, and we are very happy that this summer, John Clauser, the Nobel Prize winner of last year in physics, he also decided to sign the World Climate Declaration. And that gives, you notice that gives a boost to the declaration. So many more people now want to sign the declaration, which is great news. I think we should team up more, and we should work together. And I hope to convince more people like Judith Curry or Stephen Koonin. Stephen Koonin visited us in the Netherlands a few weeks ago. I discussed it with him. And sometimes these people are hesitant to sign because, well, it can be used against them, oh, you're on this list with other people, and you know how this goes. But I think it is very important that we, the skeptics, we are not very united. And from a scientific perspective, this is totally fine. We should have internal discussions, external discussions. It's no problem. But we should also unite and work together more, I think, if we want to make a chance to fight this climate propaganda, if you would call it like that.
Yeah, I think it's a very impressive list of signers because you have 2 Nobel Prize winners, right? I don't know how to pronounce Ivar's last name.
Yeah, Ivar Gjever, I think it's a Norwegian. He's living in the United States. And so, yeah, we have 2 Nobel Prize winners, and also people like Richard Linson, Will Hepper. They signed, Willie Soon, David Legates. So many of your former guests, I would say, because you have an impressive list as well.
Thank you.
I would say that everybody who was your guest should also sign the declaration.
That sounds good to me. You mentioned that the Clintel is involved in, did you say lawsuits or in courts? You want to talk about that a little more?
Yeah.
What are the details?
We have a high-profile court case in the Netherlands. It's between Friends of the Earth, the Dutch version of Friends of the Earth. They went to court to attack Shell, the oil company Shell, and this is called in the Netherlands a general interest court case. So it is held from the general interest. And Clintel, of course, also stands for the general interests. So when we were looking at this court case, and Shell, by the way, lost the court case. So a judge in Holland had a verdict 2 years ago, and it says that in 2030, Shell should reduce CO2 emissions by 45% in 2030. But not only in Holland, in the world. So anywhere in the world where Shell is active, they have to reduce CO2 with 45% in 2030. So if you go to a petrol station in 2030 and in the US, and you go to a Shell station in 2030, from a Dutch judge orders that this gasoline should emit 45% less CO2. It is a ridiculous verdict. And so Shell went into appeal. And so we decided to try to join the court case. But unfortunately, and this was not unexpected, unfortunately, we were rejected by the court. And this has to do with the Dutch legal system. It makes no sense to go into detail, but the problem in Holland is that if you try to join when the case is already in the appeal phase, it is much more difficult because the judge will say the facts are already frozen. So the facts are already determined in the first instance. And so what happened in the first instance was that Friends of the Earth, for example, would say, there is a climate crisis. And then Shell would answer, yes, we totally agree with that. So Shell didn't defend itself. It agreed with everything that Friends of the Earth put forward. So, and we of course tried to intervene with different arguments. And the judge said, no, there is no space for that in this specific court case because the facts are already determined by the parties.
So this seems completely insane to me that a gallon of gas that Shell produces is supposed to, when you burn it, it's going to emit 45% less CO2. How are they supposed to make that happen?
I really don't know. I mean, it's a totally crazy. I mean, they could even in December 31 in 2029, they could more or less sell their companies that produce gasoline, and then they're done, you know? So they sell it to another oil company, and then Shell has fulfilled the verdict. You know, it's completely crazy. It makes no sense.
So why do you think that the Shells of the world don't fight back more aggressively? Why do they just take this? It drives me crazy. Exxon as well. They're just taking.
In my opinion, it's fear for their public for their image. It's only that. So for a long time they played the game that okay, let's remain friends with the environmental movement, with the environmental NGOs. So we want to join them. I mean, back to the ClimateGate emails. You have this wonderful episode in the ClimateGate emails where Mike Young is discussing with his colleagues how they can get millions of funding from the oil companies, you know? So the oil companies are funding climate scientists, they're funding environmental NGOs, you know, and so they try their strategy is we keep friends with the environmental movement, and we focus on the solutions that they promote, like wind and solar. And they know, of course, that as long as you focus on wind and solar, you need fossil fuels as a backup. So wind and solar is not a real threat to their business portfolio. And the only serious threat is nuclear. And so they don't talk about nuclear. Also in the court case, there is no talking about nuclear. Shell is not investing in nuclear. And so this is their strategy. And so when we try to intervene, both Shell and Friends of the Earth had they could write to the court if they would grant us access to the court. I mean, if both Shell and Friends of the Earth had said to the court, oh, it's fine, Clintel is more than welcome because we welcome all arguments, you know? If they had done that, then the judge probably would have said, okay, you're welcome. But both Shell went to the media and they said in the media, we don't want these climate change deniers from Clintel in the court case. That's what they said in the media.
Wow.
And amazing. I mean, I had a meeting with Shell because this is the first step. The first step when you want to intervene, you first have to meet with the parties to try to solve it among the parties, you know. So I had a meeting with Shell, 2 Shell people, and I explained, who am I? Who is Clintel? What are our views? Yeah. And they ignored these conversations. They went to the media and said, Those climate change deniers of Clintel are not welcome. So this is just a statement to the media and to the environmental NGOs. We don't have any relations with Clintel, and we don't like them, and we don't want them. You know, this is their strategies. Is 100%, in my opinion, is 100% PR.
Yeah. So they want nothing to do with you, but the narrative is that you're funded by evil oil companies, right?
Yes,
That's the narrative.
That was another court case, because there was a public broadcasting company and they attacked us a public broadcasting company. So they are making TV programs with public money, with my own taxpayer money. They make these programs. They attacked me and they attacked Clintel, and they said to the Dutch public, Clintel is financed by the oil industry. And that's a big lie. I mean, that's simply a lie. So I went to court and I lost. But the judge did say that this claim was invalid, by the way. The judge in Holland, they said that this claim by them was invalid. But nevertheless, I lost. I had to pay the costs of the process. But I mean, so I have to go to court to defend myself against these lies. You know, that is completely crazy.
Wow. So a related question just came in. I'm going to ask you this from email. Do you know of any good reports comparing funding for research to promote climate catastrophe, like Bezos, Bloomberg, Gates, etc., versus evil oil companies funding research to deny climate change? Do you happen to know of any reports recently or ever that compare the size of the funding on each side? I don't know off the top of my head.
I know that Joanne Nova looked into the funding of climate science, and I also know that Matthew Nisbet did an excellent report a few years ago. I never read it in detail, but this was also you always have this David against Goliath picture of the environmental movement. Yeah, they claim, oh, we are David and we fight Goliath. You know, the big oil companies. But if you look at the funding. The funding that is going to the climate skeptic movement and the funding that is going to the climate movement, I mean, the climate movement gets much more money, of course. And I think Matthew Nisbet did some good work on that.
All right. I'm just looking at your website that you are funded by donations, and we can click on donate to donate to Clintel, correct?
Yeah, clintel.org. And we are at the moment, we are 100% funded by donations, mainly small donations by private citizens from around the world. Some people become friends of Clintel, then you donate 100 euros a year. We have now 500 friends of Clintel. So that's our base income. It's a small foundation, I would say, at the moment. We need to grow. We really need to grow, because we have now a few good organizations in the world. We have the Global Warming Policy Foundation in the UK. We have CO2 Coalition by Will Hepper, Gregory Wrightstone, of course, in the US. We have Heartland, but that's about it. And I think Clintel, of course, is looking for their role. And I think the book that we published this year, we published a book called The Frozen Climate Views of the IPCC. And in the book, we analyzed the latest IPCC report, AR6. And we did it with a group of authors from the Clintel network. For example, Nicolas Cafetta was involved in a chapter about solar. Ross McKittrick was involved in a chapter about the tropical hotspot. I myself wrote a few chapters, and Andy May wrote some. So it was really an international effort. And these are the kind of things that I think Clintel tries to be like a counterpart of the IPCC. Of course, we are much smaller at the moment. But IPCC is sometimes so weak. The IPCC report, we document clear bias in parts of the IPCC report that are really like cherry picking, incredible form of cherry picking. And yeah, so we are looking for our own specific role. The World Climate Declaration is important, but also criticizing the IPCC report. And I think Clintel, I mean, you have in many small countries, also in Europe, like the Germans have their own organizations, but you maybe have never heard about it because it's small. The French have an organization, it's also small. I was in Copenhagen, I spoke in the Danish parliament a few weeks ago, I talked with the Norwegians, with the Swedish delegation, with the Danish people, and they all have small national organizations, and they are now looking at Clintel. Could you take a leading role internationally? And so I'm really thinking in that direction.
Okay, so you think you could maybe be more of a central clearinghouse to connect all these smaller organizations? I think it's needed.
Yeah. And I mean, the Global Warming Policy Foundation is doing an excellent job, but they are focused on the UK, and CO2 Coalition and Heartland are really focused on the US. So we could try to be more like a coordinator of many other countries.
Okay. I was curious. Martin Durkin is working on his follow-up to the Great Global Warming Swindle. Has Clintel participated in that at all?
Not yet. I sent him a message after I heard his podcast with you. I liked the Great Global Warming Swindle a lot when it came out. Actually, when it came out, that's also a nice anecdote. It was shown on Dutch television, mainstream Dutch television, public television. It was shown, but before it was shown, there was a lot of critique. Some people tried to prevent the broadcasting of the documentary, and they decided to do it. And directly after they showed the documentary, they organized even a debate on Dutch television, So I was in that debate, and some other skeptics as well, and also people from KNMI and other institutes and from universities. And so back in 2007, we still had a public debate on public television in the Netherlands. But I think after the Paris Agreement, that was gone, Then we entered the era of the science is settled. Marcel, we are not going to discuss it with you anymore. We only talk about the solutions.
Well, I think that's so incredibly healthy that they had a debate on public television. I think that's wonderful. I'd love to get back to a world where that could happen again.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, so.
Which proxies do you think, if any, can help us figure out what temperatures really were like thousands of years ago? Like tree rings, I see them as they kind of can throw them out because you can't figure out temperatures using tree rings. But do you have faith in any other proxies, boreholes, anything else?
You really should try to seduce Steve McIntyre to be a guest in your podcast. But I remember from Steve's blog, Climate Audit, that there was a really interesting post not that long ago actually about a paper by Winter, a guy named Winter, and it's about a glacier on Greenland, but a glacier that is near the coast. And what's so interesting is that near the coast, during the Holocene, you didn't have a lot of increases or decreases of the altitude. And the problem with the central Greenland is that you have a lot of movement of the land. And so this influences the famous ice cores that you have in central Greenland that are always shown by Elliot et al., the paper by Elliot et al., And so that's the GRISP ice cores, that's central Greenland. But McIntyre, in this blog post, he shows that this glacier near the coast is probably much more interesting. And it shows a huge increase in temperature after when we go out of the ice age, and it peaks around 10,000, 9,000, 8,000 years ago. And since then, it's slowly going down already, so we enter the neoglacial. And I think that, at least for the Northern Hemisphere, that is a convincing picture of our history in the last 15,000 years. But in the tropics, it could be different, And but Steve is the person to discuss this with.
When you talk about movement of the land, I want to make sure I understand that. What do you mean by the land moving up and down?
Yes, I mean, so of course, when we were in the Ice Age, you had a huge pack of ice on Canada, Greenland, Scandinavia, And so when that all melted away, Greenland moved up. Scandinavia moved up again because of the weight of the ice cap disappearing, and so it moved up. So the ice caps that you have on central Greenland are very sensitive to these movements of the land. And so that disturbs the picture when you drill an ice core on central Greenland, and you have much less problems with that near the coast.
Interesting. Do you have any thoughts on the whole CO2 issue when you're looking at Antarctic ice cores and trying to figure out how much CO2 was in the air, let's say 700,000 years ago? When they look at those bubbles and figure out how much CO2 is in the bubble, do you think it retains its same CO2 concentration for 700,000 years?
I really don't know. Of course, I read the main stuff, and I know about the delay that you have between the temperature and CO2, so that CO2 is following temperature on those time scales. But I've read some of the critiques. There was also a Polish scientist, Jaworowski, and he heavily criticized these ice core studies. But yeah, it's so hard to determine who is wrong and who is right in such technical matters. It's I'm not an expert on that.
Okay. I'm curious as to how you spend your time right now on, I guess you're working on the Clintel stuff pretty much full time nowadays, and what plans you have for your next year of work. Let's say, what do you plan to be doing?
Yeah. So yeah, we finished this book about the IPCC, and we feel that there is much more to do in this regard, because there are many topics still in AR6 that we could also discuss. So actually, we should start writing new chapters for maybe an update of the book. So the book is called The Frozen Climate Views of the IPCC. You can download it freely from our website, but you can also order a signed copy through our website. So I personally have the envelopes here. I I need to go to the post office soon in 1 hour. And so I sent them myself. And yeah, we also expect new court cases by Friends of the Earth in the Netherlands. They attacked Shell, but they also have plans to attack other companies in the Netherlands. They more or less say you have to become sustainable, you have to become green. As a company, you have to become green or you have to disappear. That's what the director of Friends of the Earth in the Netherlands, that's what he's saying in the media. So green or disappear, and so they are now so they have so much confidence because they won against Shell, and so they now want to attack other companies as well. So this is another thing, and for the rest, I really want to build. I want to build an organization, because at the moment I'm so busy with leading the organization, and the organization is growing. We have more and more volunteers, also freelance people. And I actually need to go back to writing and doing research and giving talks and interviews and etc. And the organization should be done by other people, but for this we need a little bit more funding. We have now around 150,000 euros a year. That's our total budget. But it should grow to maybe 300,000, 400,000 euros a year. And then we can hire some people, and then we can really become even more effective, I would say.
Do you have opinions on what's going on with the farmers in the Netherlands, whether they're actually going to shut down farmers for climate reasons and try to maybe kill off the cattle or whatever else?
Well, actually, I did 2 years of research on the farmers issue, and it has little to do with the climate. In the US and Canada, they think it is related to the climate, but it has to do with what we call in the Netherlands the nitrogen crisis. And what is the nitrogen crisis about? As you know, farmers emit substances like ammonia or laughing gas and N2O, and these are fertilizers, you could say. I mean, this is plant food. And in the Netherlands, we have some nature areas that are really nutrient poor. So the soil in these areas is nutrient poor. And if there is some ammonia from a farm that is deposited there, the area becomes a little bit richer in nutrients. And now the government and the scientists in the Netherlands, they say we have a nitrogen crisis because the ammonia, the nitrogen from farmers, is destroying nature and biodiversity. And this is what we call in the Netherlands the nitrogen crisis. And now they want to get rid of a lot of farmers because of that. It's a completely crazy. It's Matt Briggs. Matt Briggs, the US statistician, is doing a lot of work on this. He knows a lot about it, and you should actually talk with him about what is really going on. He is the statistician that looked into all these data behind it. It is a crazy it's a crazy topic, and I still don't really know what's going to happen. But the Dutch government has a fund now of 25 billion euros. 25 billion euros. It's a lot of money for a small country like Holland. And this money they want to use to buy out farmers or to solve the nitrogen crisis. It's really crazy.
But they're really not using the alleged climate crisis. When they're selling this to the public, they're not really using climate as a justification. Is that right?
No. It's only in Holland, in the media, it's only because of the nitrogen crisis. Because we have a nitrogen policy, but in 2019, a Dutch judge, again, the judge, said that the Dutch policy that we have for dealing with nitrogen emissions was invalid. And since then we have a crisis because we now don't have a valid nitrogen policy anymore. So even if you want to build houses, when you build a house, there are some trucks driving to the place, and these trucks they emit a little bit of nitrogen as well, And so you need a permit. You need a permit for a new building project, also for nitrogen, a nitrogen permit. But there is no nitrogen space at the moment in our policies. So even building new houses or even building a windmill and a wind turbine can be blocked because of the nitrogen crisis. So it is blocking economic activity in the Netherlands. It's a very weird and strange dossier.
And is that whole thing, is that politically popular to crack down on the farmers? Voters are giving that a thumbs up, or are the voters on the side of the farmers?
Yeah, so we a year ago we had provincial elections. So we have 12 provinces, and we had provincial elections, and we have, because of this nitrogen crisis, we now have a new party, and it's called the Farmers Party. Yeah. It's the Farmers Movement Party, actually, so something like that. And so they for the first time they participated in the provincial elections, and they immediately won in all 12 provinces. And in all 12 provinces, they became the biggest. That was a huge victory. So even in the provinces that are dominated by big cities, normally you see that in the big cities, people are more progressive, so they lean towards like more leftism and greenism. And in the countryside, you have more like people voting for the farmers. But in this time, in all provinces, the Farmer Party, they won. They became the biggest. And so that was an amazing victory by them. And it shows that people are really like fed up with the politics in The Hague. And with the progressive movement, you could say, to talk about climate change all the time, and also this nitrogen crisis.
Okay, that's encouraging. I'm glad to hear that. That makes me happy.
I also mentioned this project climatedialogue.org that we set up, but it was a long time ago. But it was interesting because when ClimateGate happened, me and a Dutch friend, we were analyzing the situation. Of course, ClimateGate was also like a victory for the skeptics. We could say look, now you see yourself what these guys are doing there in these emails. They are so busy attacking the skeptics and keeping them out of the literature and keeping them out of the IPCC reports. They are not really like behaving as professional climate scientists, you know? And so that was our victory moment. But we also felt, my friend and I, we felt that this is the time not to attack them, but this is the time to give them a hand and say, okay, let's go back and let's have a normal dialogue, a normal discussion with each other about the science. And so we had this plan for a climate dialogue in which you, through internet, in which we would discuss controversies from the climate debate. And because of ClimateGate, actually, I succeeded to get funding for that from the government. So the government funded my plan for this climate dialogue. The Ministry of Environment funded this project, and they said to KNMI and PBL is another government institute, they said to PBL and KNMI, you're going to organize this together with Marcel. So they had to work together with me to set this up. And Judith Curry, for example, she was a big fan of the climate dialogue project. But KNMI, in the end, they didn't like it very much. So after 2 years, it was killed. And but it was, I still think that something like that should be tried again.
All right, very good. I have to read up on that some more. Anything else?
No.
Okay, I really enjoyed this. Thank you very much. We'll have to do this again if you have time. Marcel Crok, thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome.
Talk to you next time.